to Casuals of Runeterra Book Club. I'm your host, Ryan, and we're doing another one of those things that we usually don't do. Our point 5 episode. Part 2 is done. If you're at this point, we've gotten there, and we got to do episode 20.5, and I'm here with your other host, Patch.
What's up? I just remind them this isn't normal. All right. he only lets me out of the closet every now and then.
You know, we gotta scare them a bit sometimes, right? They're like, "Oh no, what's happening? Are they breaking up?"
No, you say breaking up. It's Hetch being fired.
Yeah, he's been replaced with AI because it's just more cost efficient. So 20.5. Remember, these 0.5 episodes are for fun, so if you don't have time for this, don't feel bad about moving on to the next episode. This is just for me to get Hetch's point of view on some stuff that we've talked about, right? And we know how packed part 2 has been, so I can lie to you and say it's going to be a 10-minute episode, and you can take that with a grain of salt.
Don't take it with a grain of salt. Take it with like 3 rock salt grains. We're talking about enough salt to season your food here.
Yeah, so let's pick up where we left off, Hetch. Thoughts on the Callista Venix duo, baby?
Oh, you already know all of my thoughts, and the best part about that comment is we legitimately have not talked about it at all. And you probably know exactly where my brain is because although I may be a disgusting goblin of a human, I am at least consistent.
On a scale of 1 to Edward Santangelo, where are your feelings at?
I may or may not be writing poetry about Finnick right now. I'm full Eduardo here.
Yeah. Shout out to the OGs.
And real talk, Riot.
Yeah,
bring Edward back. All right, like we miss him.
Yeah. So tell me about it. Like, it was definitely for me, with the the sadness of Callista leaving, obviously being engaged to Hecarim and the whole Ladros thing, and she finally sets sail on a depressing mission, and then to get introduced into the captain Venix and seeing that play out, that was a lot of fun for me. That was a hell of a way to shift into part 2.
Like, me being a gross human being aside, like Finnick is like the absolute perfect kind of character for the ambiance that was set, right? Because Callista's not happy about her situation going out.
Okay, you said
Finnick. Okay, Finnick's. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like I play Pokemon too. Okay,
I know. Listen, we've mentioned this before, listeners. Is when you get to the point of nerdism that we engage in, the overlap becomes crippling when it comes to names.
Truly crippling. Yeah. So Finnick's.
Venix, yeah.
Yeah. So Finnick's character is like perfect for as far as for that ambiance that's set, because like the mood is very dour, but it's only Callista's mood that's dour, right?
Yeah.
And so like Finnick's actually brings out like just the slightest amount of like childlike behavior out of Callista, which is great. And I like her character to the extent where it's like, because you even said in the episode, so it's like, we start off with like Pirates of the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
and then switch over into Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And like Finnick's being such a, boisterous and fun going character, like kind of gives it a little bit of its own feeling. Because it's like, yeah, sure, Jack Sparrow is very boisterous and outgoing, but he's also just like not there. Where Finnick's is very much there. Like she has a good head on her shoulders. As well as being that childlike energy. Yeah. So I think it was a good way to like kind of counterbalance it.
It's funny because originally when you're introduced, you're like, oh, Her name is Venix, and she's a Vestian. Okay, how good can this writing get, right? V name for the oh, okay, and then it started to play out, and Anthony Reynolds doesn't go away from the trope of the pirate captain character, but the way he works it in to the counterbalance to Callista and her, you know, metaphorically leaving her comfort zone and being in a space of uncomfort and then having Venix essentially being her guide to like, hey, have some fun with this. Like it's a
Yeah.
dour situation. We're on a mission, but a pirate life is a life for me. And a pirate life has some fun to it. So let's do this.
Yeah, and this is kind of a spoiler as far as for a later part in this episode, but I think that it was
Spoiler in
also
the episode for the
yeah,
episode.
for this episode, yeah. Because
You're too
this
generous.
isn't like this isn't the beginning of the of part 2, right? But
Yeah,
like
yeah. Part two
it
is
is
pretty chunky.
uh well, like technically it's at this point that like
Mhm.
we get to see this part. We just don't know why. But like it's also brilliant writing to have a Vestian captain
Yeah,
because that was a very natural way to have the characters in the story learn that there is a magical barrier to the Blessed Isles, right?
yeah,
Like it wasn't one of those things where it's like you the reader know that there is some magical force that's keeping them out. But they don't know what it is. Like they like the Venix being Vestian, it was like, oh, like what's this mist? Well, we see animal life, so we must be getting holy shit, you're glowing. Like that was it's like like that was like that's just smart writing though, right?
yeah,
Like to like give them a very natural way to kind of go along the same learning points that the reader gets
yeah.
without it feeling like they're breaking the fourth wall. So I think that was a good choice. But obviously the worst choice is that, Callista and Phoenix didn't profess their love for each other. I
Uh-huh.
think that was a really bad choice on the part of the writer, and not my personal preference at all.
I
Yeah.
love the interaction of well, first of all, her constantly calling her princess because
Yeah.
with Callista in her own world, right? In and I say world, but I'm in Camivore, her comfort zone, she feels like she's the outcast. She's the rebel, sort of. But being next to Venix, she realizes she's not a rebel at all, right? Venix is a true representation of someone who lives life by their own rules, and she's trying to show Callista that
Yeah.
that yeah, you are cool, you are special, but y- you're giving yourself a little bit too much credit.
And it's like, no, no, you're all right for
Yeah,
royalty, and I'm not gonna let you forget that you're royalty.
yeah,
Like it's, and I love that banter. I
yeah.
love it so much. It was and again, it's like it's a needed thing because sure we have really been enjoying how much we like Callista and how
Mhm.
down to earth she is compared to the rest of the Camavoran cast, but at the end of the day, like she is still part of the Camavoran high royalty, right?
Yeah,
Like she's still a very privileged person. So like this was a needed thing for Callista's character arc to kind of be humbled. Because no one in Camivore is going to humble her, no matter
nope.
how well she gets along with her soldiers and with the other common folk of Camivore. They know who she is, so they're not going to humble her. And for Phoenix, you're on my ship. I don't care. Like this my kingdom now, princess.
So I asked you before, and now that you've had a lot more content consumed, who is your favorite character now? Because previously, obviously, it was Callista, but the story focused on her. You said your spicy answer was Erlich Grail. But now that you've had some more characters introduced, who's your
Phoenix,
favorite?
Phoenix,
Venix?
Phoenix.
Oh,
Full stop, Phoenix.
okay.
Well,
For pure reasons or
for both. Why not both?
why not
uh,
both?
no, no.
Okay.
I like
Yeah,
Phoenix is definitely
I
like
keyed, I keyed.
Phoenix is easily my favorite character right now because like she's also like later on when we like deeper into part 2 she's starting to play more of like kind of like like the audience's point of view
Yeah.
essentially. It like I guess, like, I'm not finding a good way to express it there. It's,
Okay.
like, the way that, like, I am feeling when as far as, like, at a point of that story
Yeah.
and what my thoughts are, like, Phoenix is already there. And
Okay.
so, like, Phoenix is more relatable than any of the other characters at this point. Um,
Okay.
because, like, Callista is a relatable character, but she's supposed to be. She's the main character, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Phoenix does a good job of kind of, you know, because it is a prequel kind of story. We know how it's going to end,
Yeah.
but the like Phoenix is doing a good job of kind of like, kind of reminding me how I feel throughout this of just like, yo, like I think like a great point is like when we get to meet Tyrus and Rise, where Phoenix is
Hot
like,
young rise.
hot young Rise. Oh no, he's hot.
Oh no, he's hot.
um, but like at that point, like Phoenix was the voice being like, no, leave them. All
Yeah.
right, like we have a mission, we have a job to do, and like that's as far as like me. I don't know if it's just me as a person or if it is just the logical thought of, but it's like yeah, no, Phoenix was right in that scenario. But ultimately for the story, Callista was correct,
Yeah.
but like I don't think anyone would have bat an eye as far as like with Phoenix Call there,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, you got to take care of yourself and you got to make sure that you and your crew can sail out of there. So like it's the little things like that that really make me like Phoenix. But I don't want to jump too far ahead because the biggest reveal to me was Soraka.
Okay.
The Soraka reveal was insane. I
Yeah.
was
And listen, all bets are
not
off. Listen,
expecting it.
if they're listening to this episode, they know what they're getting into.
Oh yeah. No, we did our spoiler warning in 9.5.
Yeah.
All right? Like that was you should
Unless
have
they didn't
listened to that one before this. Yeah. But yeah, the Soraka reveal was huge. I was
Yeah.
blown away by it. I think I listened to that part like 3 times because I was like, no, like what did she say? Like Soraka is like the next closest to Zillion as far as having foresight,
Yeah.
where Zillion is, using time code like time cheats and cheat
Yeah.
codes to get
Cheat
that.
codes.
But Soraka is just blessed by the stars. So it was like I listened to that part like 2 or 3 times to be like, oh, what is it that she's saying? Like, what is she alluding to? And that, as far as listening to the episode, that was definitely one of the things that made me super excited to like
Yeah.
go and read the book later because it's like I want to know. I want to know verbatim everything she said. But from the point of view of Callista, like I think you did a great job of being like Callista was impatient and didn't care to listen
Yeah.
because she just wanted a straight answer. So we didn't. It's like you don't dive into it too much because your main character's not diving into it too much. I will say, you should count your blessings that you're not recording this with me
Uh-huh.
because I would have given you so much crap live recording when you were like, I hope Alawi shows up. Like, my brother in Christ, this is thousands of years before Alawi. Like, have you forgotten your timeline? Like, and that's out there now. That's recorded. You shipped that, all right? And I was like, I hope Alawi shows up. Like, who do you think she is?
We've recorded over 100 hours. Okay, I don't want to hear this shit. I'm gonna make mistakes. Some of these are recorded when I'm at my most tired. That's funny because
Hey.
I don't even remember mentioning that.
Yeah, and it's also funny because you're
But hey,
absolutely right.
Nagaboro still exists. No, wait, no, they don't. Or do they? You know what? We won't get into it. It'll be spoiler for other episodes if I try to argue my point.
All right, let's transition.
So, obviously, there's a lot in part 2 when it comes to plot devices. So this is probably a harder question than the previous 9.5. What was your favorite plot element in this part? Like out of all these episodes?
My favorite plot element, hands down, without a doubt,
Oh,
is the use of Rise in this story. Incredible.
yeah,
Absolutely incredible. Because like the build up into his retcon story and then the build up of like the animations that we got thanks to Runeterra that
yeah,
kind of gave us more of an insight in what he was doing like after his biography. and it's like, okay, like, so thanks to all of like the retconning and those buildups, we know that Rise plays a pivotal part in a lot of the most major events in Runeterra,
Mhm.
period. Like because of the nature of his role as the guardian of Runeterra, essentially, right? So like we knowing that is one thing, but getting to see it in action is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Because it was a combination of the how young he is at the point where he is going through the dungeon with Ehrlich. Like so you get to see a side of Rise that is not portrayed in his character at all present day, right?
Mhm.
So it's like yeah, he was a kid at one point and he had to grow up. So we get to see that the banter of like Ehrlich telling him like you need to calm down.
Yeah.
Uh like Ehrlich of all people, the dude who's torturing he's torturing a prefect in somewhere in this dungeon, telling a young Rise to calm down is just hysterical to me.
Sometimes wisdom comes from dark places.
It really does.
Yeah.
But the like the it's that whole thing that it's like, the we have to get to a point where the waters of life are opened up to let the events of Viego and Isolde unfold.
Yeah.
And we know what happens. We know what unfolds there. And the fun part is learning all the details, all the little dominoes that fall before that big domino gets hit.
Yeah.
And Rise being in the thick of it and basically being the key element to letting that happen is one of my favorite plot devices so far, because it's like, holy cow, like that just makes sense. It makes sense that he would have been there because he was there for so much of these cataclysmic events. So why wouldn't he be at the Ruination?
Yeah.
And then like, and then it's like, oh, none of this would happen without Rise, because Ehrlich wasn't finding the other key. Like he kind of hit the point where he's using Rise out of desperation.
Yeah.
So it's like that was like that's one of my favorite little elements there. I was super. I think I listened to that part like 3 times of just
Yeah.
like what happened to them, like
Yeah.
what's going down.
It, outside of the story itself, to kind of focus on Anthony Reynolds' decision, and it's probably a group choice as well as he was writing this, where choosing Rise, and if you haven't listened to our Rise episode, even when I recorded the Ruination book episodes, I said you might want to listen to it. There's a bit of spoilers, but to really understand how great of a choice it was to make him so pivotal because of where Rise is in his current life and what his mission is. Because Rise is in a similar situation to Zillion, like we mentioned, but Zillion can't have the influence that Rise can because he's stuck in between time. Rise doesn't have that luxury, right? He's still on the plane and he's responsible for what happens in a great degree. And he's kind of paying the price, which would be a lifelong commitment as far as we know. And his life is long. For reasons
Yeah.
that we now have some insight into. So it's just when I started getting into that part of the story, I was like, holy shit. I thought Anthony Reynolds was doing a good job, and now I think he's doing a great job.
Like, I mean, it was like it went from I thought he was doing a great job to he's doing a better job than I thought. Like it
Yeah.
was, and I already thought it was a great job,
Yeah.
and it's even better. Like it's the pieces are falling together, and they're falling together better in better ways than I think I could even dream of being able to write. So it's just hats off to him. What a good job, and I you even mentioned that it's like like Rise like has to go through it like go through the timeline as a normal person. This is why I'm constantly going to refer to Zillion as just cheat codes. um because Rise and Soraka, they are like, for lack of better words, blue smurf looking monstrosities.
Yeah.
And that's how they are able to get to the present day in a linear path where Zillion still looks like a normal dude just dabbing on his way out while he goes to a different point of time.
He's like, hey, I know I need the help, but I can't. Oh no, my hands are tied.
Oh no. Oh no, I'm going back into the past. And it's like, don't act like you're not the one casting that spell, you idiot. it's like I know I have the power to help here, but it doesn't look like this is gonna help Acathia at all. Um, well, if you don't help us, all of Runeterra will die. But Acathia is kind of in a different timeline right now. I'll come back. Oh,
So following that, what's your favorite scene out of this part? There's a lot of good
oh,
ones.
there's a lot of good ones. Oh, that's tough.
Readers and
There's a lot of
listeners
good
will
ones.
know that my favorite is already the duo of Rise going through it during his panic attack moment.
You were having a lot of fun during
Yeah,
that.
that was a great part for me.
Oh my god. I think my favorite part would have to be uh like my favorite part is probably gonna have to be with Phoenix and Callista trying to get back to their ship when they get betrayed by
Oh,
the Corsair.
yeah.
Like that was because it's one of those things where it's like no one, legitimately no one
Yeah, Razu
except
Pharaohs.
maybe except maybe Phoenix,
Mhm.
like, was fooled by that act, right? And I say maybe Phoenix because I don't think Phoenix was fooled by it, but I think Phoenix was, like, probably caught off guard by how many, like, surprises were
Yeah,
involved there.
yeah.
That like, that's the vibe I get. I
She was
don't think that
expecting
she
surprises, but it got more overwhelming and more competent of a
Yeah.
surprise than she thought.
That's what it feels like. I feel like she was maybe like she had the contingency plan set, and then it was just too many like the numbers were too great for her contingency
Yeah.
plan. Because it like at no point was anyone surprised by that betrayal.
It gives me, you know
And
what's funny? The first thing I thought about as they were in that part of the story was Star-Lord, and how Star-Lord is a character that's unique because he's goofy, he's fun-loving, he kinda just rolls with the punches, but he's also very competent, and in a lot of Guardians, when they have adventures or they're going on these quests or whatever, there is usually a plan, it's not just winging it, but what tends to happen is they don't account for a lot of things, and then it overpowers, and they're able to adjust because they have experience, and that's immediately what I thought of as a comparison to
yeah.
Venix in that moment.
Yeah, like it that is a great comparison because I do
Yeah.
feel like it was maybe like a one-dimensional plan.
Yeah.
Like it's the plan doesn't have any contingencies of like it doesn't have the if then
Yep.
boxes, right? Like since it's missing the if then boxes, like once they hit that first if then it's fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
And since they are competent outside of like the original plan and they're competent and quick on their feet, it usually works out.
Yeah.
But I think that like that was probably my favorite part because of um as far as like the mad dash back to the ship and that Indiana Jones feeling of, like start the plane. Um
Yeah.
like you have that element to it, but then it's the interactions between Callista and Phoenix, where like they're really kind of working super well with each other
Yeah.
at that point. Like Phoenix is kind of leaning on Callista as a first mate almost. And there isn't communication as far as like what needs to be done, but Callista is still operating with what needs to be done anyways. Like, okay, well, Phoenix is going to the boat. Let me go to their boat so I could get rid of their oars. And like they're just working and it's super fast paced. And I think that's probably my favorite part
Okay.
and has nothing to do with the fact with how much I love Phoenix. Um And then, like, I guess, like, the close second would
Okay, you can
be,
have a
like, the
second one. Why
adventure.
not?
Yeah,
I'm
the close second
generous.
would be the adventure of, like, Ehrlich and Rise
Okay.
because it really is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to see Rise being so human.
Yeah.
Um,
So let's jump to the part you wanted to save some spoilers for, and the second half of part 2, where we're now in Helea. Callista is there trying to get a decision. We get an introduction to Jendikaya of the Sentinels. We get a lot
yo.
of the backstory. We get to see the politics of Helea, the layout of the Blessed Isles before it becomes what it is today. What did you think about all that?
Alright, so first, I can't dive into it without being mad at you first.
Uh-oh, what did I do?
um,
Did I do a second thing where I
because
mentioned a character out of time?
no, 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 no. This is unrelated to that. I'm mad at you because I was going to make comments where it was like the writing of what Helia was like
Mhm.
is super cool to me because it kind of plays out. It plays out of just like the shining beacon of good with having a darker side to it.
Yeah.
So it feels like the Demacia of its time. And then I was going to be like, oh, it almost feels like a Warhammer story. And then you revealed to me some information.
Would you like to share with the class?
And you sapped my argument long before we got to recording, because then it's like, oh, hey, by the way, Anthony Reynolds is a big Warhammer guy too, and it's like, of course. I was like, man, I was even like kind of getting ready for like, like some specific like story
Yeah.
tie-ins with Warhammer that feels like that, where it's like, yeah, like I'm already gonna be eating this side of the story up because it has that vibe and I like the
Mhm.
Warhammer universe. It's like, oh, of course it has that vibe. He likes the Warhammer universe too. Um, so
It's
but
great inspiration.
but I really like it because it kind of it's a nice reminder that it's like the world of Runeterra is just rough all around. And like with the Demacian comparison, because like Demacia is probably like one of the shining bastions of freedom, if you want to get technical with it, because they are the other big militaristic force that's opposing Noxus, and Noxus is the big, like the imperialistic military force, right?
Yeah.
So you would probably look at Demacia first when you want to think about like the guys going up against the big baddies, but just like real life, there's nothing is black and white. There's always a lot of gray areas, and like with Jin Takai, or well, with JK, we got to see that it's like, no, yeah, like they talk a big game where there's no military force because of the barrier around the Blessed Isles, but I'm in charge of making weapons. And I, it's kind of weird because it's like you can't say that he is making weapons for good,
Yeah.
because the Sentinels, where we know them, and we've covered a lot of Sentinel content on this show, uh they exist to fight the monsters of the Shadow Isles.
Mhm.
Helia does not exist with the monsters of the Shadow Isles. So why is he making all of these weapons? And I'm glad that like you really kind of hammered home that point where it's like, yo, Callista, like her ears perked up and was like, you make weapons? Because I haven't seen a need for weapons yet, and they're trying to like paint this as a utopia, and it was a good thing to have like that gray underlying there, because the gray underlining for Demacia is that it's like, dude, mage seekers suck.
Yeah.
So it's it's opening the door to be like everything's not what it seems, and it's not saying that they're oh, they're the bad guys.
Yeah.
It's more of just saying that it's not as black and white as you want it to be. Um, and that was a refreshing thing. That was probably like my favorite twist in the Helia part of the story once we got there, was that the Sentinels are kind of on their way and building up, despite the fact that that is not they don't have the mantra of the Sentinels as we know it yet,
Yeah.
because there are no Shadow Isle monsters. There hasn't been a Ruination yet, so why are you gonna have a force dedicated to fight those things? They don't know those things. So what are they trying to fight?
Yeah, one thing that surprised me, I say surprised, but it makes sense, and props to Anthony Reynolds. If if any of you are familiar with the Bechtel test, it's in which you have two female characters interacting for long periods of time during a work of art, and there is no mention or reference to a man, right? The story is about them and what they're doing and what their growth is. And we got that a lot with Venix and Callista, where it's just them running the show, them doing their thing. It's not about some, patriarchy, whatever. And then we immediately go to the Blessed Isles with Tyrus and Rise, and we shift back to, oh, she meets Jendikaya, right? Another strong female character. and she's actually leading the Sentinel program, and we're like, "Okay," and she's bringing Callista, and that's where Callista feels more comfortable, and once again, we're passing the Bechdel test. And it's not that you write to do that, it's just how seamlessly and well integrated it is, and it adds more value in my perspective. 'Cause we always talk about how a lot of the story does so well with representation in a proper way because it can be done in a grimy way. Um, and this plays into that as well. When Jendikaya, because Jendikaya is, and I'm gonna start saying JK because we're talking about her a lot. When JK
Yeah,
is introduced, yeah,
I
uh,
like JK.
yeah, when she's introduced pretty late into part two, so we don't get much of her yet. And if you remember from 9.5, I gave Hetch a quote from her, and he didn't know who she was at that point. So
I didn't.
I'm
Yeah.
happy you brought her up.
Um, and like to the point, as far as like, passing those tests,
Mhm.
it also makes sense at the time of the story to really, have that test come back up
Yeah.
specifically for Callista's development in the story because she feels severely out of her
Yep.
element here. Because like her biggest issue at this point is that she has to wait. And Tyrus even calls her out on that of like, yeah, you're a princess. You've never had to wait for anything. Like,
Yeah.
welcome to the other 99% of the world,
Yeah.
baby. So like she's having to deal with that. And then like it's a very peaceful area before she's like, learning about anything else there. There's nothing to do. So she's trapped in her own thoughts. And it's like even mentioned that, she's kind of realizing that she is, like if she's not just stuck in a worried loop
Mhm.
of worrying about like what is going to happen if this takes too long, or worried about if Phoenix ends up being not at the rendezvous point because she had to go back and get supplies. If she doesn't focus on that worried circle, then she lets her thoughts drift to Ladros, her feelings with Ladros, and the guilt that she feels that she's thinking about Ladros, not about Hecarim.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that to have JK jump into the point of the story there because the last thing that Callista wants to be doing is thinking about a man. Because she's got a very complicated scenario going on there.
Yep.
And the only thing that's distracting her from those complicated thoughts is a worried loop of the worst case
Yeah.
scenarios. So it's like, oh, like JK is like, yo, I make weapons for this group called the Sentinels. Thank God. Like, let's go. Like that's really what it boiled down to, right? Like is the timing the timing was just as good,
Yeah.
outside of like the actual writing and their dialogue.
Okay.
Like the timing of it was perfect.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been going on for a while, and I think we're at that point where, um, overall, what are your feelings on this part? And since we've done this before, compared to the previous part?
So like as far as like the main feeling is that like I can't wait for us to get through part 3 so that we can record this again and specifically so I can go listen to part 3 and
Yeah.
then just go read this. Like I'm excited to like get more of this story.
Yeah.
That's definitely like the biggest feeling up there. I am I am now like for the this is I could argue like for the first time because like part 1 did not have me at this point.
Mhm.
But like so for the first time I can say that I'm actually excited to see as far as like I'm actually excited to see the progression as far as the actual character interactions for the build up of returning to Camivore to then have our journey back to Helia. Because there's a lot going on for each of the characters that have been in part 2.
Mhm.
And I'm really curious to see how that's gonna play out when we get back to Camivore. Because I mean, we know what's gonna happen to Helia. Like
Yeah, unfortunately.
that ain't a surprise. And like, but it's like there are so many different like underlying issues that the characters are struggling with that really helps you relate to the human side of it. And I can't wait to see what Anthony Reynolds does to kind of wrap it up into the finished product because he's got it. Like I think that he has his fingers on the pulse of the story of the Ruination. Like it is I think he really has brought it to life in a much better way than I could have anticipated. So I'm really excited to see how these pieces fall together before we start returning back to Helia,
Okay.
because there's all the pieces needed to make a picture, and I just can't see the picture, and that's exciting with a prequel story. If I can't see that picture, like it gives me something to look forward to, and to see what like how it is going to fall into place before we start on our epic ending. Because, who boy, is it an explosive ending?
And how we ended the last part, and I want to do that again, is with the quote that we're given at the beginning of the part. And for this one, it is, quote, "Better to act and risk a mistake than do nothing trapped by indecision." And this is an ancient Camavorian proverb. What does that mean to you?
Paralysis analysis is a thing.
Exactly. So, like we said, I lied about 10 minutes. I warned you.
If they didn't know by this point, like, how many hours do we have recorded? Like, they know.
But with that, we'll leave it there until, once again, we finish part 3. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode. And once again, since Hetch is here, he can say his part.
Yeah, take care, everybody.